So welcome to the October 6th Reparations Committee meeting. We are excited to be hybrid now. So if you could please spread the word and let everyone know that you can participate virtually or in person. You can sign up online at cityofelvanston.org and learn all about that. We also have our community stakeholder leaders like Indana that generally streams it and posts updates and so on. I don't know if she'll continue doing that now that it's hybrid, but no, okay, perfect. So so thank you for bringing it to the community until this point that we were hybrid. Appreciate you. Before we get into the meeting agenda, we have a new committee member, and we want to say congratulations to our new Second Ward Councilwoman, Chrissy. If you could just introduce yourself.
Hello. Good morning. My name is Chrissy Harris. I'm a resident of Evanston, born and raised until I went to college. Second Ward, I work at Oakton Community College, and I'm excited to serve the community in which I live, and I'm excited to be on this committee, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Chrissy, for bringing your talents to the Evanston City Council, to the Reparations Committee. We know that you've been paying close attention to the reparations work for the last few years, and so you can jump right in. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Hello, Mr. Sutton.
Good morning.
We are so glad you're here because...
Where are the men?
Yeah.
Okay, already. Hey, brother.
There you go. All right. Love that sweater.
Thank you.
Perfect. So if you remember, we passed a Ancestral Acknowledgment that we are going to open up our meetings with, so we are clear on why we're here and what our goals are, and that we are acknowledging those that came before us, fighting for our repair and empowerment, and also those that were harmed and not able to experience this season of repair for us. So Mr. Sutton is going to start us off with our first reading. From meeting to meeting, we will rotate the reading, starting with Mr. Sutton because he is our elder, and we will always give honor to our elders. And so Mr. Sutton will read, and then next meeting it'll be Councilwoman Chrissy, and so on and so forth.
Okay, good morning. With great humility and deep gratitude, we honor the strength, endurance, and sacrifice of our Black ancestors. We honor these enslaved African people whose forced labor was exploited for generations to help establish the economy of our region and the United States. We honor those Black ancestors who persevered despite discriminatory laws and practices that created a racial caste system, legitimized anti-Black racism, and continue to plague our community today. It is only by recognition and understanding of these errors begun during our nation's origins and continue today that we can hope to correct our path. We acknowledge this exploitation of not only minds and labor, but of our humanity. We grieve for those Black ancestors who, despite their contributions to the city's wealth and freedom, were never recognized, fairly compensated, nor allowed to fully realize their own sovereignty. Because of their work, we are here and will invest in the descendants of that legacy. And through this process, we will work to repair some of the harms caused by the city of Evanston. We also hope and focus attempts at reparations will serve as an example to the entire United States of America's government and prompt all other institutional accomplices to begin the process of repair.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Moving on to item 2A, may we have a motion to approve the September 1st Reparation Committee meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
The item has been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, what am I doing next? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect, thank you, that motion passes. Now, we're going to get into some really important discussion. As we know, there is, excuse me, I have a text from Councilmember Reed is en route. As you know, we have so much work to do, and even with the $10 million commitment, we have so much work to do. We also have lower revenues than projected based on conditions outside of our control, delayed cannabis licenses. We have only still the one dispensary here in town, and so we're looking for new funding scenarios. So the first, we're going to start with the discussion, and we'll wait on Councilmember Reed because this is one that he has been most interested in. Let's move on to A2, which is restricting the graduated real estate transfer tax and designating a portion of it or it for reparations fund in perpetuity. And I'll open that discussion up because it was actually my original thinking for a first funding stream for reparations. One, there is a direct correlation between real estate and property and the harm that we have identified here in Evanston, and it seemed appropriate. Two, we had only just passed this graduated real estate transfer tax maybe the year prior to us passing reparations. So at that point, it had not been really identified into our budget, specifically earmarked. And so we need more revenue streams. And so we did have a favorable memo from our Corporation Counsel, Nick Cummings, in support of this being an appropriate reparations funding opportunity. I wanted to open that up for discussion and then make sure that Corporation Counsel, Nick Cummings, added anything to the discussion that we need to know, and also he's available for questions as well. So I'm in full support of it. We just have to discuss if we are in support and then decide from there percentages, dollar amounts, and so on. Do you want to kind of set us up?
Can we hear from him first?
Yeah.
Give us some background.
And he's done this before, but we're going to ask him to do it again. Thank you.
Good morning, members of the Reparations Committee. Nicholas Cummings, Corporation Counsel, City of Evanston. Essentially, what was asked of me back in June was to identify various funding sources that we could to supplement the reparations fund. The memo that I prepared back in June talked about any taxes that the City of Evanston can rule as a home rule municipality. The graduated real estate transfer tax is one of those taxes. It is believed that now we're in budget season for those of you who are council members, can certainly identify and reallocate where those funds go, like now is the time. If that fund is being directed to the general fund, the council can say, well, we want to redirect that to a different fund. And that is what I believe the discussion today is about. And procedurally, it would take a vote of the committee to send that recommendation to City Council to say we recommend using the graduated real estate transfer tax to fund reparations instead of funding operations. And that is true for a litany of other municipal home rule taxes that I can't think of off the top of my head right now. One of those that I identified in June was the medical marijuana tax. The city levies taxes on medical cannabis. That revenue does not go into the reparations fund. Only the adult use cannabis tax that is given to us by the state goes into the reparations fund currently. You know, if it's advised, but you don't have to because it's a home rule tax, but it's advised if you wanted to keep a close relationship to the harms that have been caused, such as Chair Simmons talked about the real estate transfer tax. And we know from evidence that there were policies that negatively impacted Black Evanstonians with respect to real estate. That makes sense. But you don't necessarily have to have that one-to-one correlation. It is a political decision, as Judge Jean-Baptiste educated me on early on, for the City Council to decide how to spend its money on a home rule tax. So if the City Council says, we want to use this revenue for this purpose, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah. Questions? First, thank you. Secondly, we have a choice of perpetuity for percentages or a set amount. Do you have any idea how much this account brings in annually for the city?
I do not. That is I can always try and look at our current, what's budgeted in 2022, expected to bring in terms of revenue from that. But I wouldn't have that answer. Our CFO would have to answer that question.
And Mr. Sutton, I had the same exact question, obviously, like, what are we even talking about here? You know, $100, $1 million. And so we did ask, and I think we had kind of a broad response Tashik, did we get a detailed answer yet from Hitesh?
No, Atash was out of the office this week, so maybe at the next meeting,
Okay,
I can bring a report.
okay,
Or send that to you all.
perfect, yes.
So if we had a more general vote about the use and then tabled the discussion about the particulars to the next meeting, how does that interplay with the budgeting process and how things are allocated? If we wait until November, are we going to miss this opportunity or have to backpedal? Is there a way to put a placeholder in until we can go through the particulars?
It's not, you won't necessarily miss the window of opportunity. My understanding is that the budget will be, the first draft of the proposed budget, we presented to City Council on the 17th of October. So I don't expect that to be, I definitely don't expect the City Council to say, this is the perfect budget. We're gonna pass it right now. So I expect that there will be more work to be done beyond the 17th of October. So if you did want to take that, if you wanted to vote on that now, but then wait and see what those numbers actually are to make a further recommendation later, you can. But the City Council, how they work with the budget, and
There's opportunity for
Yeah.
revision. Okay.
I mean, it may not get passed until December. We don't know.
Tashik, and then I'll respond to that.
So I'm looking at the budget calendar, and the earliest possible adoption date is November 22nd.
So what I would suggest we do is have any further discussion on our support of moving in this direction. Wait to get the numbers from Hitesh, and then if necessary, schedule a special meeting if we need to get ahead of the council calendar, so that we can send a recommendation that's detailed and specific. But any further discussion on this as a funding stream generally?
Yeah.
Just point of information, I want to understand what funding stream.
So we waited on one so that you could be here. So we're on two right now, which is the graduated real estate transfer tax. And so where we're at, it sounds we're leaning towards the general support of that. We have Corporation Council in support of that as a revenue source, and we're talking about as much detail as we can, not having revenue information, historical revenue information.
My
Yeah.
question is, has there been any precedent for this? I mean, has this tax been used elsewhere in the past?
Yes, so of course, because it passed, I believe that was 2018, if I'm not mistaken, but do you want to respond in detail on what line item it is in the budget?
That, unfortunately, that information I don't know in terms of how, like,
General fund.
So some of the monies were.
All of it goes to the general fund right now.
Yeah, I know, but my question was to use it in a separate way, like we are asking to have it be used for reparations. Has
It's
it
currently
ever-
used in the general fund,
Okay, so it has not been used in another way ever before?
just the general fund.
Which supports the multitude of
I know what a
departments.
general fund is.
Perfect. Councilmember Reed, did you have anything before we?
Yeah, I think, so if we're still talking about two, I support generally using the real estate transfer tax for reparations. I do think it might be, these funds in particular might be good for affordable housing generally. But I do think looking at number one, which is.
Can we wait to get
Oh,
there?
okay. Sure.
Anything else on?
No, I think, and we don't have an estimate of the annual revenue. I know
That's where we're at right
I know the increment, the new increment is about 1.2 to 3, maybe even all the way up to $1.5 million. So, are we just talking about the new increment, the graduated portion, or are we talking about the full tax?
We're talking about the graduated tax.
So just the increment, we're talking about the graduated portion of the tax?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, so that'll be about, roughly 1.5 max annually.
So we just wanted to wait until we had those numbers. We know a ballpark, and Hitesh was unavailable to get it to us. Are you able to pull it up quickly? Or?
Yeah, here I can pull it up.
Thank you.
While we're waiting for that, I'd like to say that I would be in favor and think that as we get more information, but that we stand behind it as a general movement, but then decide what that looks like.
Perfect, thank you.
And just for clarity, and obviously you guys make this decision, but from a staff perspective, it's the assumption that the recommendation would be to supplement the current funding source
Absolutely.
with the graduated. Gotcha.
Let's please make that very clear. So, yeah. This is an additional funding stream, yes.
I just could say that maybe we could not work so much, look at the numbers today and look at the discussion because we have the other areas to discuss. And I mean, there's some other things on our agenda that we might want to make sure we get to.
I agree. It would be helpful because budget, you know, the council members are coming with their own ideas and leadership on what they think should happen with the budget. So the sooner I think we could get this in front of them to answer their questions, concerns, educate them, I think is better.
Yes, it's very appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
In front of us immediately,
Yeah.
we're beginning budget talk, so
Yeah.
the more information that we can share to our counterparts is
And the sooner. Yeah, Mr. Sutton?
Yeah, my other concern is to have specific information. We also had traditionally set-asides for affordable housing, and I've never known of any distribution from those funds. I had a very long talk with Ma Rainey when she was here. We're collecting all this money from these buildings in lieu of, for where, how much is in that account, and how much is available for affordable housing.
So,
And at that time, she said they could only take it out from the tax, it had to be a minimum amount for distribution.
So that everyone understands what Mr. Sutton is bringing up, a very good point. The inclusionary housing zone allows for planned developments to pay a fee in lieu of affordable units. And what I hear Mr. Sutton saying is that we should learn more about where that fund stands and consider that as a revenue stream as well.
so if I may, Mr. Sutton, I had this conversation recently with our interim community development director, Sarah Flax. The city's affordable housing fund doesn't have the revenue that it used to. And that is because the inclusionary housing ordinance was amended to allow or at least encourage developers to include more on-site affordable units rather than paying the fee in lieu of. So more of our recent developments in the city of Evanston have included on-site affordable housing, or at least they've been developing units for affordable housing instead of paying the fee in lieu of. And so the affordable housing fund is still there, but it is usually used to subsidize or encourage development of affordable housing rather than to support this particular fund. That doesn't mean that that couldn't change, and I could actually, have our office look into that. But that usually is money directed toward, for example, SEPA. If SEPA wants to build a development, it helps subsidize some of that financing to build affordable housing units, is usually what the Affordable Housing Fund does.
Thank you. Do you think you're going to get to it, Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, I can drop the note in at some point during the weekend. Yeah.
Okay. So then we'll move on from that for the sake of time.
I did find, were you looking at the 2022?
Yeah, I was looking for the 20, yeah.
It doesn't show the graduated.
Yeah.
But it does show that the city received $3 million in real estate tax as of August 2022. But it doesn't show the graduated.
3, you said?
Yes.
Right. So that's, thank you. That's not the detail that we need to have a informed discussion. So we'll move on from that and hope that Hitesh can get us that. And we will call a special meeting if we need to. You guys can keep us clear on where the council is, and if we need to call a special meeting, we'll do that. So let's move on to,
Do
yes.
you want to make a motion right now, though, that we get behind that?
Well,
Without knowing that we're going to get the...
so we have consensus that we want to move forward with this as a revenue stream with more information. What type of action do we take without being able to give clear direction?
Take an action.
Oh, I mean, I think it's worth discussing all of the options, but I do think that the action, or the motion could be to, direct staff to look into what exactly the increment is, and then recommend that that increment be dedicated to.
I move that we move forward with the graduated real estate transfer tax as an additional reparations funding stream.
Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect, so we'll move forward with that direction, and further action will be taken once we have information from him. And let's go on to 3, and that's setting aside $3 million of ARPA funds for economic development. And so why it specifies economic development, the Corporation Council has looked into this as a funding stream and is advising that if we do go forward with this as a funding stream, that we look to use it for economic development purposes. That is a next step of reparations that a lot of people are really depending on us to get to. So that it would leave some funding opportunity available for us to get to economic development. And this would be more likely identified census tract based on where we have economic development opportunities in predominantly Black neighborhoods. And so if you want to give us any setup on this?
Sure. Good morning again, members of the Reparations Committee. I actually brought the final rules from Treasury from January 2022 on this particular issue to try and help guide some of this discussion. But in any event, essentially we can use ARPA funds in any qualified area, understanding that the economic impacts tended to affect Black and brown folk generally, and the Treasury even recognizes that in the final rule. But we can utilize ARPA funds to support businesses, to subsidize jobs, to employ people who are either under or unemployed due to COVID, even if that business itself didn't necessarily suffer an economic loss. And there are guidelines in terms of which households might be eligible for something like that. But we can certainly use those dollars to be targeted in those areas that we know were impacted as a result of COVID, which tend to proportionally lean this way. We don't necessarily have to specify race. Federal dollars tend to not allow us to specify race, but we can always use a slew of different qualifications as a substitute for race, and we know that they tend to be race. For example, that Treasury allows recipients to identify impacted and disproportionately impacted beneficiaries based on their eligibility for other programs with similar income tests. So if someone receives Children's Health Insurance Program, or Medicaid, or TANF, or SNAP, all of those, and we know that those disproportionately go to Black and brown folks, we can utilize ARPA funds in those areas and those folks that qualify for those programs will be eligible for whatever program this committee develops.
Awesome. Thank you. Any discussion among the committee?
If we could just give the definition of ARPA, so those people who know that acronym, please.
Yeah, it's American Rescue Plan Act.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I would love to hear from our leaders that are on the council on kind of what do you think the appetite is, what's been the direction, what type of opportunities remain with the ARPA fund?
ARPA funds are starting to dwindle down. I believe there's somewhere south of less than 10 million left in ARPA. I think it's roughly 9 million. Tashik, does that sound about right? Yeah. So I think this council and our city has made a lot of declarations of supporting reparations, and so I think there should be appetite. I think again, the funds are really getting small now, but I think this is something that if coming from this committee with full support. I think it's something the council could get behind. But I think it's also something we need to be pretty direct on, move quick on before other proposals come in.
I agree with that completely. Yes.
So where did given that there's $9 million left, where did the $3 million ask come from?
Well, initially, we have a maybe $3.4 million gap. Maybe it's less now with the cannabis sales tax that's in our fund to fund it. We're trying to fund all of our ancestors.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so that was where that goal is coming from, that dollar amount. Although this particular funding bucket is not ideal for that purpose.
Right. So we might, if considering going forward, we might just remove that dollar amount and just.
Or we may
put in
not,
the ask.
right.
Yeah, put in the ask for, the more the better. And if the programs could fit squarely within, for economic development, my preference would be not to limit it, would be to ask for as much as we could from the ARPA funds, realizing that, you know, there will be some other requests and allocations, but not to limit that with the ask of $3 million.
So,
Go ahead.
okay, I would suggest we put a dollar amount, because if you let me decide, then, and not me, but a person decide, then they may tend to go lower. So you always want to start with the highest ask, knowing that the potential to be lower is there. So even if we raised it to 4, really hoping that might be an option. But we should put a dollar amount to it.
No doubt that, you know, the recommendation goes with the dollar amount for obvious reasons. And also being mindful that, you know, the ARPA dollars are because of the crisis of the pandemic and intended to be used in areas that were affected by the pandemic. So there, you know, are other priorities and.
I can imagine some health disparity issues they're trying to address.
Exactly.
I want to concur though with Claire about it not being limited to just economic benefits. I know that that is a big issue, but there are other issues too that could benefit possibly from the fund.
Well, one thing is we have to remember our resolution 126R19 is clear on priorities, housing, economic development, and educational initiatives. And so we have to, for now, stay in that framework for now.
And education was exactly what I was thinking of.
Okay, and so we
that
have to
was my
really
other-
take some time to
other
define what we mean when we say educational initiatives, because we have an elected school board here, and they have the responsibility to repair harms in education. So I think that's something that we should take some time to define even more so. But in the recommendation that we have from Corporation Council, economic development is certainly within our priorities, and it is an expectation from the community. I've been hearing from community, when do we get to economic development? When is there going to be support for business development in Black communities and so on? Mr. Sutton?
Yeah, my concern was, is there any way we could also probably supplement the CBG funds? Mostly, my view is going into businesses, small businesses in this community, and I always felt that there should be a set aside for housing rather than for us having that responsibility as a reparations committee. I've looked into HUD grants, and they have used community block grant funds for many of the things that we're going to use for the ancestors. So is there any way that we could get that commitment for these funds to be, I don't want to use the word set aside, but appropriated to use for some of the things that we've already talked about, or improving your home without any cost, helping you out on some of the other situations of repairs and things like that. That is so essential with this increase in taxes, especially to people on fixed income like me. And especially since I see 2 more for sale signs in my block, which means gentrification is still alive and well. So if we could get sure that we could get some of these designated, that will be a specific amount that would go to specifically the 2nd and the 5th wards,
for this kind of economic.
And eighth ward.
And so, well, remember so let's do this. I want to respond real quickly that that community development block grant being another federal stream, Corporation Council is probably going to give the same response, but I think what we should do is get a list of a report of all of our home rule taxes. And so we're not just kind of, oh, what about this, what about that? And we can actually go through what you're advising, or at least sharing that we consider home rule taxes. And then if we could get a official response to Mr. Sutton about CDBG.
So I was going to suggest I can talk to Sarah Flax to have that discussion, because I don't know exactly how much money we have in CDBG right now. That's usually distributed annually by the federal government. And I also don't know what programs the city currently has in place out of CDBG to support what you're talking about. Understanding that when the program was designed, it was always intended to be supplemented by other opportunities, right? So if there is a current program for the city to use CDBG funds, the city has historically, and I know because we have a lot of foreclosure actions as a result of it, given loans to people to help to do exactly that out of either NSP or CDBG programs, neighborhood stabilization program, or community development block grants for those that don't know the acronyms. The city has historically done that, so I don't know if it's still doing that or not with the current CDBG funding. The only other thing too, and I know I showed this to Councilmember Reed, I just wanted to put this on the committee's radar. The City Council approved an ARPA plan in March of 2022 and divided exactly how much money was going to go in to support certain programs. So there were two programs that would be very pertinent to this group, which is negative economic impacts and services to disproportionately impacted communities. And the total promise of ARPA funds by the council at that time was 18 million. So I don't know exactly how much of that 18 million has been committed, but to give everyone an idea of what that was done back in March.
Awesome. So with that, because we have another really big discussion item, there is support from the committee to move forward with the ask for ARPA funds. Let's discuss the amount. Right now we have $3 million up for discussion. We understand there's around 9. Would love to hear from the committee on some direction that we can send forward with a recommendation to the council.
I would move I mean, I don't want to sell it short if folks are saying go higher, but I'd move the 3 million forward.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Second. So we're going to move forward with a recommendation to the city council that $3 million be set aside to the reparation fund specifically for economic development opportunities.
Discussion.
Yeah, we're going to vote. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, okay.
I would just increase the dollar amount. I would increase it to 4 or 5, because I think we're going to get kicked back. That would just be my preference.
I will make a friendly amendment to move the dollar amount up to 5 million.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are making a recommendation that $5 million be set aside from the ARPA funds to the reparations fund, specifically for economic development. Great. And now we're going to move on to item A1. This is advancing $3 million from the general fund to the reparations fund, which would allow us to fully fund our ancestors.
I would move that. If I can move that, and then we can discuss it. If there's a second. Okay. Yeah. I think we should make sure, particularly, I've said this before, I think we're all in agreement, understanding the, just to qualify as an ancestor, you're in your 70s or older. I have folks in my ward who have reached out, curious about when they might receive funds, and I don't feel happy to tell them that I don't know exactly when, particularly those ancestors will receive funds. And by making this transfer, we can ensure that at the beginning of 2023, in just a few months, that every single ancestor is taken care of. The city has a, at the moment, we have a healthy reserve, a healthy surplus, and we can.
Can you give us some detail?
Yeah, our surplus, last report was, our general fund was sitting at $47 million, and we have a current requirement that we withhold 16.66% of our general fund expenditure and reserve, and so that number is 19.1 million. So we have a very healthy reserve, or we have a very healthy surplus. And I think it's time for us to determine our values, and with a surplus that large, and we'll dwindle down. I think Hitesh has estimated that at the end of the year, if things go accordingly, the fund will be sitting at about somewhere between 30 to 35 million, so still a healthy surplus there. And this is something that we can afford. And so I think we should take care of this and make sure our seniors are taken care of.
Committee member McFarland?
So I wonder if Council Cummings can speak to, because my concern, of course, I think we all, it goes without saying, share the priority and the sentiment that we want to get reparatory funds in people's hands as soon as possible. However, my understanding of the current law gives me concern that this use this way might leave us open to some legal challenge. I'm not sure if that could be, if we could circumvent that by some kind of designation as a loan to the fund. But from my understanding of the way the law stands, this would leave us open. This would really open us up in a more significant way to legal challenge.
Sure. So first, I want to say that the risk that it poses to us increases the people who could have potential standing to challenge the program. Right now, it is very difficult to identify someone who would have standing because of the criteria that the committee has set for eligibility for the program. You actually have to basically have suffered discrimination and be able to show it, and then have applied and have been denied because of the basis of like your race or age or gender or something like that. Because of our criteria spells out, at least for the first two, that you should be a Black Evanston resident or just a Black descendant of an Evanston resident. But the catch-all was, if you can prove discrimination beyond 1969, regardless of race, you could be eligible. The idea of what's called taxpayer standing, which is anyone who pays taxes, that's supposed to be for the benefit of the whole. If the city takes money that was allocated for that and then redirects it into something that is not meant for the whole, it's meant very specifically for the smaller beneficiary group, which is the Reparations Fund, then individuals could, not that they would or will, but they could then challenge the program without even having to have been eligible to be for the program in the first place. They can just say, you are misdirecting my tax dollars. Now, I have reached out to Chapman and Cutler for an even more learned opinion with respect to tax policy on this. I have not heard back yet, but that is from the research that my staff did this summer. That is my understanding of how that could play out. Again, I'm not saying that, and I know the question was posed to me in June, well, will we win? A good lawyer will never give you certainty. We can tell you what's likely and what's not likely to happen. So the answer to that is I don't know. But the idea that prior to even the city council considering and approving the resolution creating the program, we were getting threats from conservative groups that are just waiting for an opportunity. And I feel like this taxpayer standing idea would give them that opening.
Councilmember Reed and then Sutton.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying on the taxpayer standing point, but I mean, if we're concerned about someone gaining taxpayer standing, I think the cannabis tax opens us up to the most, only because anyone can go into a cannabis store and buy cannabis. They don't have to be a resident of Evanston, and would that grant them standing as someone who paid the cannabis tax? We just voted to support moving forward with the real estate transfer tax. So does this now, would that also likewise increase our liability, because anyone who sells a house would have standing, and who buys or sells a house would have standing to challenge us in court because they are now a taxpayer? And so I think there is some risk with all of this, but I think I trust Evanstonians, and right now the real estate transfer tax is a tax that goes to the general fund. We can make this transfer, and I do not believe that we have some great thing to worry about. I think we can make this transfer. We can do right by our ancestors. We can live up to our commitment, and we can be bold. And there are communities right now that are using $10 million in ARPA funding for reparations. You want to talk about bold, and they're not, worried about, and the taxpayer standing there is much greater than it is for our local use general fund taxes. So I hope that, in a bout of overcautiousness, we sell our seniors short, and we don't live up to the values that we committed to years and years ago when Robin first made the bold presentation of putting forward this very concept. And so I think we need to continue being bold. We need to stand up to the bullies that have tried to threaten us from Washington, D.C. and other places. These aren't Evanstonians that sent those letters to us. These are folks from out of town. We should be able to trust our community and live up to our values.
Chair Simmons, can I just briefly?
Please, yeah.
On the first two issues, that's precisely why I've reached out to Chapman and Cutler for a more learned opinion with respect to the other taxes, whether that would propose taxpayer standing. It's my understanding that as, for lack of a better term, voluntary taxes, the response will be no. But that's why I reached out for that piece. And as far as using ARPA funds for reparations, we have looked in, I believe it was Providence was one of the communities that's doing it. But at the end of the day, they're still funneling those funds to qualified census tracts, which is how they are able to substitute race. The one community that tried to use CARES funding, I believe it was in Oklahoma, and this is before ARPA, they were immediately sued, and those monies are still tied up by an injunction because they tried to utilize the money based on race. But if they would have gone to qualified census tracts, it might not have been a problem. But I'm trying to. And my job is to be overly cautious, and you guys' job is to be bold. So I'm just giving advice to try and reduce the risk profile. That's all.
Mr. Sutton?
Yeah, two concerns. If we had not already lost several recipients from the ancestors, I probably would not see this as something that we should address. But more important, when I looked at that lawsuit from Austin, Texas, that came in here, we have to decide, we as a city have made a commitment to fund reparations for 10 years. Now, are we going to be like when Martin Luther King went on the March of Washington? We've presented you a promissory note and your answer to us from Evanston that there's insufficient funds. So go back, that piece of paper that we've given you from the Constitution that you deserve these kinds of commitments, that you no longer are eligible for that kind of callousness. I do not want to be in a city that's afraid of some racist asking about a question of how his money's being spent. When one, the city's already made a commitment to people like me, and two, that there's no way you could repay me or my family for the damage done. So anyone who has a question like that, I would love to address him personally.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons, and this the last point I forgot when I was responding originally. It's one of the reasons why I've recommended the council, or I've recommended to this committee that they recommend to the council to reallocate certain home rule taxes to supplement the fund. If the political decision is made on how the city's going to spend its money from the get-go, the money, and it's part of the response to the adult use cannabis tax, the city made, before a single dollar even came into the city determined that it was going to direct that money into the reparations fund. So it was never had an opportunity to get into the general fund. If the city council does the same thing in 2023 and says, we're going to direct certain taxes into the reparations fund, there's no question. It's a political decision that the city council can make to do that. The only risk arises when you have money that's already been set aside for use for the general welfare, and then you start to say, well, we're only going to use it for a certain few. That's the risk. But if the city council from the get-go, to your point, says we're going to fund as we promised, starting in 2023, we're going to direct these taxes to fund this promise, I see less risk.
So, this is where I really feel my lawyer hat coming on. I share from the beginning, and I think we all share trying to get those distributions out as soon as possible. But given that we have some options for some streams that are less likely, to invite litigation, I think we do have, well, I feel strongly that we should explore those initially. I appreciate that, the passage of this ordinance really solidifies the city has made the commitment, and I think that generally when I speak to people, they're very supportive and really proud of this historic program, but all it takes is one. And the whole thing can be caught up in litigation, funds can be tied up in joint, those cases can go on for years, and we're stuck. That's where I don't want to go. And so that's why I think the program is bold. I am all for coming up with, and it's hard, and that's why we're here, coming up with alternatives. I really love the others that Attorney Cummings is exploring, because those seem to be safer options, and it seems to be that we do have some other options. There may come a time when we want to push the envelope and become the municipality that has made some historic legislative history as well, and judicial history in the case. We've made the legislative, but judicial history in the case. But I think let that be at our planning when we are prepared, and not when we're prepared for that hit that may come. I think that should be part of a plan that we are, that we've made provision for. At the moment, the risk of having the whole thing tied up in injunction, as what's happened with what some previous states and the risk to the program, I feel that unless and until we explore all these other options, that's not my preferable avenue.
Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, I just want us to really, we're saying, we're using this, almost like boogeyman risk that's under the bed. What really is that risk? What are we saying? Do we have any analysis on, does this increase our risk by 5%, by 0.5%? What kind of analysis has been done to really determine that this truly outweighs? Have we done a cost-benefit analysis? And I don't think we have. We've just stated a risk without quantifying it, and without truly naming exactly what that risk is. If anything, I'd be more worried about someone who would have standing, right? If you're paying the real estate transfer tax, you're moving out of Evanston. And that person might be the person that I'm more worried about potentially suing us than someone who's choosing to live in this community or who's still committed to staying in this community. So I think, again, it's $3.5 million from local general fund, from our local general fund, that would be going to reparations. I don't know of, and Nick, please correct me if I'm wrong, of a single Evanston resident who has sent a formal letter to your office or any other city office that said, hey, I'm thinking about suing with this. It would be costly litigation on their end, and they would become someone who probably couldn't show their face in this community, with the shame that would be attached to, filing a suit against this program. So I would love us to do, if we're going to say no to those seniors and we're going to let more and more people, and I hate to say this, but more and more people pass away before they receive a benefit that we committed to them years ago, then we should really have a deep understanding of what we're passing up on, what the real risk is, and not just an invisible boogeyman version of risk. Let's quantify it.
I can happily try and get that analysis for you. As I mentioned previously, Jenner and Block has graciously stated that they would defend us in such litigation pro bono. And so I can ask them for such analysis with respect to standing. I believe I brought it up to them a long time ago, actually, but I do not have that analysis, and I can certainly push for it for you.
Mr. Sutton?
Yeah, I want to address everyone's concerns, but let's get one thing clear. The city of Evanston Black residents, as far as I'm concerned, should have had a class action suit against the city of Evanston and realtors for the redlining and the denial of generational wealth that has affected us in this community. I don't know how many of you sitting around this table, your grandfather's house was moved from the 7th Ward with compliance with the city and realtors in this city.
That's right.
No money was given to him. Destroyed the man's reputation in this community and had harm that has taken me almost 2 generations to return to the place where we had some kind of family stability. And I'm not going to sit here worrying about what someone's going to say. My concern to them, then we'll come up with our lawsuit too. You want to sue us about this, then we can come back and sue you for the damages that you've done us in the past. Now, we want to start talking about lawsuits. I don't want to use that as a concern or weapon, but at this time, in this political climate in America, I favor boldness rather than the kinds of things that we should withdraw going forward because of worrying about kickback or reaction.
Great. And so obviously I favor boldness too. That's why we're all here today. But sometimes the federal law and morality and our values don't always completely align. And so with that, we do have to have a vote on this because it keeps coming up for discussion. And I personally feel there's a lot more discussion to be had. So much has not been said. We don't have the information that Councilmember Reed is requesting in terms of, what is the harm or the possibility, the threat, how do we quantify it, and so on. So are we okay with having more discussion when we get the information that you're requesting from Council Cummings?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is important. I think this is something we should get done before the end of the year, and it should be included in the budget. So if Council Cummings thinks that he can get that analysis from Jenner and Block or whoever in the next month or so.
I agree with you on that.
Certainly, sorry, as you were speaking, I had a brainstorm, and I can certainly look into some research on this, but would you consider at the end of the year, that the council has to do sort of a budget reconciliation, and if there are certain funds that are underfunded, we have to shift that money around. Would you consider that transfer happening during that process? Because I wonder then if it would be an issue, because the
commitment has been made.
right. And so, for example, this past spring, for those of you that may not have been here, there was about $11 million sort of underfunded from several different funds within the general fund. So the city council had to pass an ordinance to basically amend the budget in order to fund those funds based upon what was considered, and I hate using this word, but a surplus in the general fund. With that same guise, would you be open to considering it during that reconciliation process to make that transfer then as opposed to now?
I'm going to jump in and say I would like to make a committee decision not based on the remnants and what's left over. And a commitment from the city is going to be a commitment before we know what is left over, what is and what isn't wanted. So I would like to see a report that has been requested from Councilmember Reed so we can understand what kind of risk, and then what does that risk mean? So say, for example, we do get the lawsuit, and I'm hearing Councilmember McFarland talk about injunctions and all. Does this mean it would stop the flow of our disbursement like generally, or just that particular funding stream?
Disbursement would stop, but
even for cannabis and
revenues would continue,
right.
But we could not pay recipients.
So that we're clear, that's from the cannabis, that's from the real estate transfer tax, that's from, okay.
Well, that's not a guarantee. I mean, the judge could make any determination. They could say just these funds are in,
Yeah.
I think.
Injunctive relief is not exactly easy to obtain.
correct.
There are 4 elements that you have to meet, and the person who has standing to be able to meet those elements would have to meet all 4 of those elements. But if they are, and let me back up, a preliminary injunction is a little easier than a permanent injunction. And so what we would face potentially is a preliminary injunction that basically says you can't disperse. And then we would have a protracted battle to try and find out if we should be permanently enjoined from dispersing funds.
Thank you. So let's do this. Let's get the information that Councilmember Reed is requesting, understanding that our audacity could have the whole program stalled. And that's something that we need to know. What is the risk? What does the time frame look like? Or is there so little risk that we're willing to move forward, understanding that risk? But let's do it with all the information, and if a special meeting is going to be necessary in terms of timing, then we can do that. And Council Cummings, if you could, as quickly as you're able, get that information, and then we can move forward with the next meeting on that.
To be clear, then, if we made this transfer, the $3 million, and we transferred, as we have in the past, the money to SEPA, at that point, the money's already been essentially given to the recipients. Or am I incorrect on that? Once the money leaves our bank account,
So
you can't enjoin us from.
Sure, but and part of our agreement with SEPA is actually to indemnify them as well. They would likely be a party, and they would not be able to pay out of the money that we pay them. So to your point, yes, we've already paid money. The 16 ancestors that have already qualified and have received funds, they've already been paid. They would not be at risk. But the only potential risk would be any new recipients post-transfer if somebody went to the courthouse immediately and filed something. And again, I'm not trying to be the boogeyman and scare people. My job, if I'm doing it correctly, is to apprise you of potential risk. And so that we can make decisions accordingly.
Perfect. So also it's going to be helpful to have the list of home rule taxes, and that we can consider so that we're making a really informed decision moving forward. So much more to say on this, but for the sake of time, we're going to move forward. Our goal is to have these meetings until 10:30, just so that everyone understands it's not till 10, but we do have more to discuss. And so there we are going to give further direction once we have more information. Thank you. Next, we're going to move on for discussion. Item 3B, the approval of the local reparations restorative housing program designation of beneficiary form. Staff is recommending this approval. This came from the unfortunate loss of ancestors. And so we're looking to have our recipients identify a beneficiary in the case of their transition. Is there a motion to,
Move approval.
Second.
any discussion?
Great idea.
Yes.
Yes.
I also, it's a great idea. I just wonder, if I'm number 21 in line and I'm an ancestor and, the person right before me passes away and then, their 16-year-old gets funds before I do, how do I feel as the ancestor who's getting skipped over for someone who's, likely got more time? So I wonder if these folks, I like this form. I think we should allow folks to designate to their ancestors. But I wonder if they get moved to some other point in the line, so then our seniors who are still alive, our ancestors who are still alive, are getting the funds first.
So I appreciate that thinking, but I think in part the commitment is to build generational wealth and legacy. And in some cases of even at least one, if not more, of our current recipients, they are transferring their benefit to a direct descendant, their son. And so I see your point. We all want to prioritize the ancestors, those are directly harmed, but in the honor of their legacy, that benefit goes on to
their family.
build wealth within their family. And that's just my thinking on it. Is there any other discussion? Yes.
Yes, my concern was before, several of these people were asked to make a designation. What if they've already passed? Now, I'm currently in court now to become the estate of my brother. And what I had to prove that I was the sole surviving in regard to any other requests that might come in. Because he cannot sign this form to sunset.
Right, but there's a probate, and so Council Cummings, can you respond to that?
And the cost of that probate.
Right, so the law department's position is, once the city has designated someone as a recipient, if they pass before getting, like physically getting the benefit, the city still owes it to the estate. And it goes,
That's clear.
if they pass intestate, unfortunately it goes to court, and it does have to be meted out in probate. And what the court determines to do with the benefit, and I've had this discussion internally with staff, is sort of beyond us, right? So we have this eligibility criteria. We say we're going to use the money for these three things, but if they pass away and they die intestate, and the court says, okay, this $25,000 goes in the pot, and this is how we split it up, and it has nothing to do with improving a house, paying out a mortgage, or anything like that, that's how the money gets spent. And I don't know if I said that clearly.
Yeah, that was clear.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was clear. Was there, did you have something that you were supportive?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
And so with that, this is for action. I'm sorry, Councilmember Reed, did you have more
Oh,
discussion?
no.
No?
No.
Okay. I move approval.
Second.
Oh, 1 second.
There's just there's one more thing I just wanted to point out. On the form, there should be a designation of a power of attorney.
Yes.
Right.
And so the designation of a power of attorney is specifically for this benefit. It is not a general designation for power of attorney. And I have Mari Johnson from my office who worked on this with the Sheik, did the research to make sure that this was exactly how it should be done. So I wanted to make that clear to the committee that it's specifically when they designate a power of attorney because of mental incapacity or something of that nature, it is specifically for this benefit. It is not a general designation.
Thank you for that clarification. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Moving on for communications, we have a lot of communications. One, we have our Reparations Town Hall, which is going to be on October 22nd at the Great Second Baptist Church, which is downtown Evanston, pastored by Reverend Dr. Michael Neighbors. All are invited. It is a public event, and Our hope is that everybody on the committee will be there, so OME rules will apply. There will be public comment. It will be live stream. Is it interactive live stream Tashik set up, or is it just visual?
Visual.
Visual, okay, perfect. And so is there any discussion on the committee on that? Perfect.
I'm excited.
Yes, excited about that. And then we have our flyer should be in the packet. Hopefully you can share it with your networks and community as well. We're having a reparations art contest. It's important that our young people get engaged and start getting themselves educated and expressing themselves on their feelings about reparations through many ways, including art. So this is being run by our city staff here. There are cash prizes for our young artists, $200 each. I think is 4 categories. So $200 cash prizes. Please share that with your young networks. The big payback. There was a documentary released on our work here in Evanston, and so it is really shows the detail of what happened from the point that we passed reparations in 2019 and to the point that we passed our first initiative in 2021. A couple years later. So that's happening. It's playing at the Chicago Film Festival at the Chicago History Museum on October 22nd and 23rd. Please do check it out if you're interested. And then next, 5D. The housing services provider for the City of Evanston's local reparations restorative housing program. I just want to bring that up for discussion, if there was any discussion on that item as well.
I didn't include the RFQ in the packet because it's long, very long.
Yeah.
But the deadline for submission is October the 11th.
Perfect. So we're hoping, as soon as we do have funds right now, we can't say exactly how much, but we do have funds in our reparations funds that can be dispersed once we identify a new administrator of the program. So we hope that we get responses on that. And then, do you want to give us our financial donation report?
Good morning. So as of October 4th, the city has received $36,344 in donations to the Reparations Fund, and this represents a $700 increase from September.
Awesome, thank you. And now we'll have public comment. Is there anyone signed up?
Yes.
A quick, just question for, I know that we, a while ago, Council Cummings and you engaged with 3 different firms to get opinions on whether or not a direct cash benefit would, be viewed in a similar light as the program that we have now. Is that something we can get an update on, either now or at the next meeting?
That opinion has been shared, I believe, with the committee.
I know we got one.
Right. And so if the committee chooses to take that route, the tax lawyer that I engaged, I won't say, found a way for us to make it happen, is what I will say. It's based upon that opinion that was shared with the committee. The other 2 opinions were regarding whether those benefits would negatively impact folks who already receive government benefits, and I forgot what the third item was, but I do have those opinions. I can't recall what they are off the top of my head right now. I received them sort of in a window when I was unavailable to the city. So I do have them on those last 2 issues, and I will share them.
So let's plan to put it on our next committee agenda.
Yes, we'll do it on the next.
Sure.
Thank you, Council Cummings. We're going to move on for public comment. Let's see, we have 2 minutes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many are online?
3.
2-minute public comment. And we're going to start with Jason Lauren. Welcome, Jason.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, committee, for all the work that you've been doing. I support everything that you say. The reason I'm standing here today is, as a point of information, I want you to know that the Reconstructive Judaism community just recently passed a resolution in support of reparations. And the reason that's very important in my view is because what we need to do is we need to penetrate the Caucasian elements of our community. We need reparations to ripple throughout the entire community, and this is a great start. And I'm hoping that when we do the public hearing, the public town hall meeting, and I've been at both of those so far, I don't see enough representation from Caucasian residents of the community present. And I hope that, for example, members of this Jewish community could be invited perhaps to speak at that public comment section or as part of the program. Now, as far as this resolution is concerned, it's long. I'm not going to read it all, but I do want to read, thank you, I do want to read a couple of the recitals and a couple of the pieces of the resolution that I think are important, if I give that opportunity.
Yes.
Okay. Whereas chattel slavery involving the theft and forced migration of African people to and around the Americas, where they and their descendants were sold as property, was practiced in all 13 of the British colonies that form the basis of the United States. And that practice, with its inherent cruelty and brutality, continued through and beyond the founding of this nation, expanding to other states until 1865, with the status and wealth of the nation thereby inextricably tied to the lives and labor of many millions of enslaved people. That is a critical talking point when it comes to reparations and why it's owed to our community across the nation and in other countries as well. We're going to move on. Whereas healing and reconciliation cannot begin without confronting the truth of the United States history and it's long past time to acknowledge and address the multiple and incalculable harms perpetrated against people of color, black and indigenous people communities throughout colonization, slavery, oppression, and white supremacist policies and practices. I'm going to move on. The Jewish tradition holds
I'm sorry, it's 2 minutes. Thank you. If you want to maybe share that with the committee, we could share it in our packet, and then that way it'll also be in the public packet as well.
Okay.
And
Thank you, and please take my thoughts into consideration about how we can penetrate the Caucasian community and get them on board in understanding the wisdom of your conduct and your actions.
Absolutely, thank you for that. And we don't respond to public comment, but I just want to lift up some of our Jewish leaders, most active leaders in this community, starting with Rabbi Andrea London at Beth Emmet Church and the entire congregation there, and a coalition of more than a dozen houses of worship that are committed, and these are ally houses of worship, non-black majority houses of worship. And so if anyone wants to connect with that community, reach out to Beth Emmet and find out how you can get engaged. And we would love to see more of our allies at these town halls. There was a bad rumor going around that white folks weren't wanted at our town halls. And so we tried to correct that, like, we absolutely want you there. So please do come. Thank you. Next we have Mr. Bennett Johnson. Right. And then after that, we're going to have Indana. What a blessing it is to see you, Mr. Johnson.
Well, I'm one of the ancestors.
Yes,
And congratulations on what you're doing here. I think it's more than important. I want to recall that in 1999, there was a conference on reparations at Northwestern University led by Hazel Taylor. And I think that you guys should find out more about that. I unfortunately have moved 3 offices, so I can't find my records. But that was a very, Clarence Jones was there, Maria, a lot of people who were very distinguished. I just want to say that a lot of people in this city, blacks, do not have a house. Some live in cars. Then there are others who have paid for and don't need any help at all with their house. So there's a need to think about how to expand reparations. So I'm suggesting, one, a real estate investment trust to take care of all the housing problems. Two, a venture capital group that would help people get in business. Three, a health and welfare fund that could be not-for-profit, where people could get health care and also buy a car if they wanted to. And then also education, where you give scholarships and loans to people who are trying to get through higher education. I think I put this together in a Freedom Fund. I think, Carlos, you have a copy of it, and Bonnie, you too. And I think I know I gave it to you. So I think we ought to think in other terms. I'm not saying you should stop what you're doing, on the contrary, but I think you should think in terms of these other ways. Have some niceties that I'd rather discuss another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And Donna?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I was just going to say that I was in agreement with both Claire, it's gone, and Devon that we should increase the ask above the 3 million. I mean, I'm a salesperson at heart, and I was going to say to ask for more than 5 million, but you guys have already voted on that. And then Council Cummings had mentioned that you couldn't specify race when inquiring about money from the ARPA funds. And I was going to say that I know that Family Focus is going to receive $3 million for the Immigrants Welcome Center, and that they specified that it's for the Latino community that they're receiving, considering that Evanston has been receiving immigrants for years, decades even. And a lot of those immigrants in the past have not been, I know we don't want to talk about race, but because the complexion of the immigrants that we're receiving now are different, and now they're giving more money. I'm wondering if they're now giving more money because the complexion has changed. That's a big issue that I'm having with the fact that we're not asking for more money, and that our community, for generations, they've been, taking money and taking resources out of our community, and we shouldn't be afraid to ask for more.
Thank you for that really thoughtful comment, Donna. Next we have Ms. Priscilla Giles, and then after that is Eleanor Soup.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't know what the real money is going to from either the transfer tax fund or even the for when you need something done on your house and you pay, because I had it and no one ever came to check it out. But any black person who owns or rents in Evanston, who has a home, needs some kind of repair or maintenance. So reparations money for all African Americans should go for income producing, benefiting all African American generations with roots since the beginning of the 1800s, going back to 19 whatever. It's not using all of the people, not even thinking about all of the people who had redlining from the time they came to Evanston. I think this is not, 16 families does not cover all of the people who've had redlining against them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Giles. Eleanor, and then after that we'll have Tina Payton. Is Eleanor here or no? So next we'll go to Tina Payton.
Ms. Payton, can you unmute?
Oh, hang on.
We can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
you hear me? Okay, hi. Good morning.
Good morning.
First, I'd like to thank you for making the meetings hybrid. It's very important, and I wouldn't have been able to attend today if you didn't do that, so I really appreciate that, and so do the other seniors and people with health conditions. Number two, economic development for the ARPA money has already designated the $5 million. So maybe you'll have to call it something else because they had a certain amount that they were going to use for each category, and they've already designated the $5 million for economic development. Number three, the real estate transfer tax, and probably why you couldn't use it earlier, was because that money goes to affordable housing fund. So people were not going to use that for anything else except the affordable housing fund. Then I thought maybe that this committee should combine the donations and the cannabis money into one pot, and then we would know how much is in there without divulging how much the money would be. So, for instance, if you have $1 million in the cannabis tax and you have $500,000 in donation, and you put them together, and each maybe quarter, you could say, this is the new pot. And you wouldn't have to say if it was from the cannabis tax or from donation, just say this is how much money is in the whole account. And then that would not be violating any laws.
Thank you, Ms. Payton, for your thoughtful comment.
Oh, I just have one more thing.
Okay.
I didn't hear Attorney Cummings talk about the cash payment that he said that told Mr. Sutton. So I would like to talk about that next time if possible and open the application for cash payment. And in response to the earlier gentleman with including the Jewish community, I'm not saying not to include the Jewish community, but they have received reparations already, and maybe next time, Robin, Chair Robin, you can talk to him or talk to the committee in public next time about the Jewish community. I know you did several conferences with Mayor Biss and the synagogue, and Mayor Biss talked about his relative receiving cash payment for reparations. So maybe we could talk about that next time. Thank you so much, and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. You have a good day too, Ms. Payton. And then next we have Tracy Powell, and last is Jody.
Thank you so much. First, I'd just like to say thank you so much, Councilman Robin Rue, as well as the committee members for all the work that you are doing and continuing to push forward on this. My first thought was I wanted to ask if there was going to be a education component added to the reparations. Being able to obtain an advanced credential would help African American families in Evanston to achieve equality, independence, and prosperity. It would also even the playing field for African Americans to achieve higher incomes on our current jobs and to meet the rate of inflation happening right now. Being afforded reparations would also help African American families who are already in an economic strain to be able to pay for their young adults' education and to achieve generational wealth like their white counterparts. To not put a strain on young adults to be able to take.
We lost you. Are you? Is she still on screen?
Yes, she's still on screen, but something wrong with her volume.
Okay. Hopefully she could come back. It seems prepared and very thoughtful. I would like to even archive it. We're gonna move on to Jody. If Tracy gets back her volume, then we'll go back to Tracy. But last we have Jody.
Jordy, do you read?
Jordy, okay, the writing. That's your writing
No
Tashik?
No
Blame
worries.
Tashik.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm a researcher at Johns Hopkins University. I did my graduate work in Chicago, and I am conducting a case study on the Evanston Reparations Ordinance. I just wanted to introduce myself and let you know that I'll be reaching out over email. I've reached out to a couple of you already, and just to have a short interview and conversation about the origin of the housing ordinance and the political conditions around developing the ordinance. And so I'd love to be in conversation with as many of you as possible. I'll drop my contact information in the chat here to share out after the meeting if anyone wants to reach out and is willing to be interviewed. I really am in awe of all the work that you all are doing here and am excited to be in conversation.
Thank you for your interest. Was Tracy able to get back?
Tracy?
I am so sorry,
Okay.
you all. I did drop my comments in the chat to everyone. I am not sure, my audio is going in and out. So I'm gonna try to see if I can drop it into the chat.
If not, you can email, is it T. Kerr or Tashik K? What I forget what.
tkerr@cityofevanston.org.
Perfect.
There's
T,
one.
sorry.
T is in Tom.
Okay,
KERRR.
got it. At what? Sorry.
Cityofevanston.org.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much. I will email it, but I did try to drop it in the chat as well.
There was one more person, Jeffrey Watt, but I don't see him online. Jeffrey, are you here?
Okay, with that, may we have a motion to adjourn?
So no further business
Seeing
before
no
us.
further business before us.
You can declare the meeting adjourned.
Is there a second? Okay, yes, meeting is adjourned. See you all next time.